Dad disowned me for outshining his golden child. He never expected my business to succeed 5 years later. My company bought his employer. He's not dead to me. He's just unemployed. Alright, Reddit. Buckle the hell up, because this story has everything. Family dysfunction, favoritism, a risky business decision, and probably the most satisfying, I told you so moment of my entire life. I've been sitting on this for months, and honestly, I just need to get it all out. I'm a 32-year-old guy, and from the outside, my family looked pretty normal. Middle class, stable, nothing particularly dramatic. My dad had worked for the same regional manufacturing company for about 25 years. He started as a floor supervisor and eventually worked his way up to operations manager. My mom stayed home and raised us kids. Pretty standard American dream setup, right? Wrong. Because my younger brother, Derek, who's 28, was the golden fucking child. In my parents' eyes, that guy could practically shit diamonds. And the favoritism wasn't subtle. It was painfully obvious. Let me give you an example. When I was in high school, I had to maintain at least a 3.5 GPA or my parents would take away my car privileges. I was expected to get good grades, stay out of trouble, work hard, and basically earn every bit of freedom I wanted. Derek? This guy barely scraped by with a 2.1 GPA and got a brand new Honda Accord for his 16th birthday. Not a used car. Not. We'll help you with the down payment. A brand new freaking Honda Accord, with the insurance paid for an entire year. I worked at Target throughout high school and college to help cover my own expenses. Derek didn't work a single day until he was 23. And even then, he only got a job because Dad pulled strings and got him a cushy position at his company in the sales department. No interview. No resume. No proving himself. Dad basically walked in and said, "My son needs a position." And somehow, boom, Derek had a $45,000 starting salary with full benefits. Meanwhile, every achievement I made got some version of a half-hearted, "Good job." Derek could do the bare minimum and my parents would throw a celebration dinner. I graduated college with honors in business management. My reward? A $50 Olive Garden gift card. Derek finally graduated after 6 years with a communications degree and a 2.3 GPA. My mom threw him a party with around 40 people, catered food, decorations, the whole thing. The double standard was so ridiculous it could have been a reality TV show. But I kept my mouth shut. I kept my head down, worked hard, saved money, and told myself that eventually they'd see my value. Surely, at some point, they'd realize that I was actually doing something with my life. Spoiler alert, they never did. After college, I landed a solid job at a mid-sized tech company in operations management. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a good position, and I decided to learn everything I possibly could. I got deep into supply chain logistics, vendor relationships, manufacturing processes, procurement, inventory management, the whole thing. The company made industrial components. Nothing exciting enough to make the news, but it was a steady industry with healthy margins if you knew how to run things efficiently. I spent 3 years there busting my ass. I volunteered for extra projects. I stayed late. I learned every part of the operation I could get my hands on. Meanwhile, Derek was coasting along in his sales job at Dad's company. Basically, he was getting paid to take clients to lunch and play golf. He'd show up at family dinners bragging about his big deals, most of which turned out to be reorders from clients the company already had. But Dad acted like Derek was out there closing Fortune 500 contracts every week. He couldn't have been prouder. Around my 3rd year at the company, I started noticing some serious inefficiencies in our supply chain. We were relying on outdated distributors that charged ridiculous markups and had terrible lead times. So I started digging. I researched alternative suppliers. I built relationships directly with manufacturers. I studied pricing structures. I looked at ways we could eliminate unnecessary middlemen and get products to customers faster. I started putting together proposals for my boss. He hated them. He was an old-school manager who didn't want to hear new ideas from some young guy. Every proposal I brought him got shut down. Stay in your lane. Just do what you're told. That's not how this industry works. Basically, the classic attitude of, "We've always done it this way, so we're never changing it." The funny thing was, the system was broken. They just didn't want to admit it. And that's when I had my first real moment of clarity. I was 28, sitting in my apartment one night, looking at spreadsheets I'd built in my spare time. I stared at all the numbers and suddenly thought, why the hell am I trying so hard to fix someone else's company when I could build my own? The idea itself was pretty simple. Cut out the unnecessary middlemen in industrial supply chains. Connect manufacturers directly with end users. Streamline logistics. Use modern technology instead of fax machines, phone calls, and outdated systems like we were still living in 1995. It wasn't some revolutionary invention. I wasn't trying to cure cancer or build a rocket. But nobody in the industry seemed to be doing it efficiently. So I decided to try. I spent 6 months planning everything while keeping my day job. I built a business plan, identified potential clients, mapped out the technology infrastructure, researched suppliers, built relationships with manufacturers, worked on pricing models, and most importantly, saved every penny I could. I lived on ramen, peanut butter sandwiches, and whatever cheap food I could throw together because I wanted enough money saved to survive if the business didn't make $1 for months. Eventually, I had enough saved to cover roughly 6 months of basic operating expenses. That was my safety net. It wasn't much, but it was enough. So I put in my 2 weeks. My boss literally laughed in my face. "You're going to start your own company in this industry?" He actually laughed. "Good luck, kid. You'll be back here in 6 months begging for your job back." At the time, I just nodded and walked away. Looking back, I probably should have taken that as my first warning that people underestimating me was going to become a recurring theme in my life. I was actually excited to tell my family. Stupid, right? But at the time, I genuinely believed they'd be proud of me. I'd spent months planning this thing, taking a huge risk, and trying to build something that was actually mine. I wasn't asking them for money. I wasn't asking them to fix anything for me. I just wanted them to be happy for me. So I scheduled a family dinner at my parents' house on a Sunday to tell them the news. Big mistake. Huge. I showed up with a printed presentation. Yeah, I know how that sounds. I had made an entire PowerPoint deck like I was pitching to investors. Market analysis, financial projections, potential clients, growth strategy, everything. And the embarrassing part? I was genuinely nervous. Looking back, I probably should have taken that as a warning. I got there around 5 p.m. Derek was already there with his girlfriend, some girl he'd been dating for maybe 3 months who, somehow, already had a list of wedding venues she liked. They were sitting around drinking a bottle of wine my parents had apparently bought specifically for them. Meanwhile, Mom offered me a beer from the back of the fridge that had probably been sitting there since 2019. I laughed it off. After dinner, I pulled out my laptop. "Okay, I have something important to tell you guys." Dad immediately looked annoyed. It was like I'd interrupted his quality time watching Derek breathe. Mom at least tried to look interested. I started going through the presentation. Market opportunity, competitive advantages, revenue model, potential clients, growth projections. I had put a lot of work into it, and honestly, it was solid. I'd spent months preparing everything. When I finally finished, the room went completely silent. Nobody said anything. Then Dad slowly put down his wine glass and looked at me like I just announced that I was dropping out of school to become a professional juggler. "So let me get this straight," he said. "You quit your stable job with benefits to start some distribution company out of your apartment?" "It's more than that," I said. "It's a technology platform that modernizes how..." "Technology platform, right?" He cut me off. "And where exactly are you getting the capital for this little venture?" "I've saved enough to cover the initial operating costs. Once I have proof of concept, I can look for additional funding." "Funding?" He actually laughed. "You think banks are going to give you a loan? You think investors are going to throw money at some kid who quit his job to play businessman?" The disappointment in his voice was so thick you could have spread it on toast. Mom just sat there looking worried, twisting her hands together. "Dad, the industry is changing," I said. "The old model is inefficient. I've already identified. The industry doesn't need changing by you." His voice had gotten harder. "It's worked fine for decades. What it needs is people who understand it. People with experience. Not kids with PowerPoint presentations. Derek, because apparently he had never learned how to read a room, decided this was his moment to jump in. Yeah, man. I don't know. Sounds pretty risky. Maybe you should have stuck with the steady paycheck. He shrugged. Not everyone's cut out for the entrepreneurial thing. This was coming from the guy who had never taken a single professional risk in his life. He'd never applied for a job without Dad's help. Never built anything. Never put himself on the line. But sure. Tell me about entrepreneurship, Derek. I've done my research, I said, trying hard to keep my voice calm. I've built real relationships with manufacturers. I already have clients who are ready to commit once I'm operational. Clients. Dad said the word like it was something disgusting. And what happens when those clients don't pay? What happens when your suppliers demand payment upfront? What happens when you run out of money in 3 months? You think you can just come crawling back to a stable job? I'm not planning to fail. I said it as calmly as I could. Nobody plans to fail, he shot back. But most people do. Especially people who think they're smarter than everyone else in an industry they barely understand. That one stung. I'd been working in this industry for 3 years. I'd actually done the work. He had spent most of his time managing people from an office. But arguing that point with him wasn't going to accomplish anything. Mom finally tried to calm things down. Honey, we're just worried about your future. Your father has seen a lot of businesses fail in this industry. He's just trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I looked at her. I need support. Dad pushed his chair back and stood up. You need a reality check. He crossed his arms. This whole generation thinks they can just skip the hard work and start at the top. You need to put in your time. Learn the business the right way. Work your way up like I did. I've been working my way up, I said, my frustration finally starting to show. That's exactly what I've been doing. This is the next step. The next step is job stability and experience. He shook his head. Not throwing away a good position to chase some fantasy. It's not a fantasy. I have a real plan. You have a dream, he interrupted. And dreams don't pay bills. He was getting louder now. This is irresponsible. Reckless. I didn't raise you to make stupid decisions like this. The room went quiet. Derek was sitting there with a smug little smile behind his wine glass. His girlfriend looked incredibly uncomfortable. Mom was doing what she always did whenever Dad got like this. Staring at the table, saying nothing, trying not to rock the boat. I looked around at all of them. Then I looked back at Dad. So you're not going to support this? I asked slowly. It wasn't really a question anymore. I already knew the answer. Support you while you throw your life away? Dad's voice was completely final. No. He looked straight at me. I'm telling you right now, if you go through with this, you're on your own. Don't come running back to us when it falls apart. I wasn't asking you for money, I said. Good, because you won't get any. He walked over to the kitchen sink and calmly rinsed out his wine glass, like the conversation was already over. Then he turned back toward me. I'm telling you this as someone with actual business experience. You're going to fail. And when you do, don't expect me to bail you out or help you find another job. You made this choice. You live with the consequences. I looked at Mom. I wasn't expecting her to suddenly stand up and defend me against Dad. I just wanted literally any sign that she was on my side. Anything. Instead, she gave me that sad, helpless look I'd seen 100 times before and quietly said, maybe you should think about this a little more, honey, just to be safe. Then Derek raised his glass. Of course he did. He'd never miss an opportunity to be a dick. Hey, if you need a reference when you're looking for work again, let me know. I might be able to get you into the mailroom. That was it. I closed my laptop. I stood up, and I headed for the door. Where are you going? Mom called after me. Home. I opened the door. To keep building my business. You're making a mistake, Dad called from the kitchen. A big one. I stopped and turned around. Maybe. I looked him directly in the eyes. But it's my mistake to make. Something changed in Dad's face. It went cold. Really cold. It was that same disappointed expression he'd used when we were kids and had done something he considered unforgivable. "If you walk out that door and go through with this," he said, "don't bother coming back until you're ready to admit you were wrong." He paused. "I'm not going to sit here and watch you ruin your life." I stared at him. "So that's it." He didn't answer. "I either give up on this or what?" Dad looked at me for a long moment. Then he said it. "As far as I'm concerned, if you're stupid enough to do this, you're dead to me." Those were his exact words. Dead to me. Over me starting a business. Mom immediately gasped. "Honey, that's too far." "No." Dad cut her off. "He wants to be treated like an adult making adult decisions? Fine. But he doesn't get to make stupid choices and still expect family support." He pointed toward the door. "If he's so confident this failure is going to work out, he can do it without us." The thing is, I didn't beg. I didn't break down. I didn't try to convince him to change his mind. I just looked him straight in the eye and said, "Okay." That seemed to surprise him. I think he expected me to fold. Maybe he thought hearing the words "dead to me" would scare me into giving up. Didn't. "You don't mean that," Mom said weakly. "I do." I nodded toward the door. "I guess I'll see you around." I paused. "Or not." Then I left. I got in my car, drove back to my apartment, walked inside, locked the door behind me, and that's when I finally cried. Not because I regretted my decision. I was sad, obviously. Anyone would be. But mostly I was pissed. Pissed at Dad. Pissed at Derek. Pissed at the entire situation. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn a place in a family that had already decided who mattered more. And apparently, starting something of my own was enough to finally push me out completely. So you know what I did that night? I worked on my business. I sent emails to potential clients. Refined my supplier list. Worked on my website. Kept building. Because honestly, fuck them. If they wanted me to fail that badly, I was going to give them the one thing they clearly didn't expect. A reason to regret betting against me. The first 6 months were brutal. I'm not going to sit here and pretend it was easy. It wasn't. I was working 80-hour weeks out of my apartment and living on the absolute bare minimum. Most days I'd eat the same meal twice. Usually rice with whatever protein happened to be on sale that week. My apartment was basically a bedroom and an office. I had an air mattress on the floor and a used desk I'd bought off Craigslist. That was my entire setup. Those first few months tested everything I thought I knew about myself. There were nights when I'd lie on that air mattress at 2 in the morning, staring at my phone and seriously considering texting my dad. Just one message. Something like, "You were right. I can't do this." The rational part of my brain would list every reason I should quit. I was burning through my savings. I had no safety net, no guaranteed income, no family support. One serious medical emergency could have put me into bankruptcy. But then I'd remember Dad standing in that kitchen. Remember his face. Remember him looking me in the eyes and telling me I was dead to him. And that stubborn part of me would kick in. The part that refused to let those words become true. I even started keeping a spreadsheet of every family gathering I wasn't invited to during those first few months. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Mom's birthday, Derek's promotion celebration. Every event became another reminder of what I was supposedly missing. Except here's the weird thing. I wasn't actually missing anything. I was building something. Every time they posted pictures from some family dinner or celebration on social media without me, it didn't make me want to quit. It just added more fuel to the fire. My neighbors probably thought I was losing my mind. I'd be on conference calls at midnight with potential suppliers in different time zones, pacing around my tiny living room while trying to negotiate terms in broken Mandarin I'd picked up from YouTube. The walls were thin enough that I'm sure my neighbors heard everything. The successes, the rejections, the arguments, the moments when I'd hang up a call and just stand there staring at the wall, wanting to punch something. But I kept going, because I'd already been told I was going to fail. At that point, the only thing left to do was prove them wrong. But then, 3 weeks in, something happened that changed everything. I landed my first client. It was a small manufacturing company that needed a reliable supply of industrial fasteners. Nothing glamorous. No massive contract. No big-name corporation. But it was real revenue. The owner's name was Tom. He was this gruff, 60-year-old guy who'd been running his business for about 30 years. He'd seen pretty much every distributor scam and sales pitch imaginable. He didn't trust new suppliers. Honestly, I couldn't blame him. But he gave me a chance because, unlike most of the people he dealt with, I actually showed up on time for our meeting and came prepared. I had market data, pricing trends, supplier comparisons, everything. After my pitch, Tom leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "Kid, I don't know if you're going to make it in this business," he said. "But you're the first person in 10 years who's actually done their homework." Then he paused. "I'll give you a trial order." That trial order was worth $3,200. To someone else, that might not sound like much. To me, felt like $1,000,000. It meant someone had trusted me enough to put real money behind my idea. Then came another client. Then another. I reinvested every penny back into the business. I upgraded our technology infrastructure, improved our systems, and started building something that looked less and less like a guy working out of his apartment and more like an actual company. Eventually, I hired my first employee. His name was Joel. He'd been working at a dead-end logistics company and was just as frustrated with the industry's outdated way of doing things as I was. More importantly, he actually had a vision for where the industry could go. We clicked immediately. For the first year, we worked out of my apartment. We took calls on our personal phones. We used my living room as storage for sample products. There were boxes everywhere. My dining table was basically a second desk. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't building something to impress my parents. I was building something because I believed in it. My parents didn't call. Not once. Mom sent a few texts here and there. Things like, "Hope you're okay," or "Thinking of you." But nothing meaningful. Nothing that addressed what had happened. Nothing that said she disagreed with Dad. Nothing that said she was proud of me. Meanwhile, I'd occasionally hear through extended family that Derek was doing great at Dad's company. He'd gotten promoted to senior sales associate. Or some other made-up title that sounded impressive. Apparently, he was doing really well. I didn't care. At least, I told myself I didn't. I was too busy building my own company to worry about what Derek was doing. By month 8, we'd completely outgrown my apartment. We signed a lease on a small commercial space, about 1,200 square feet. Most of it was warehouse space with a tiny office area in the back. It wasn't much, but walking into that place for the first time felt incredible. It was a real business space. My business space. I hired 2 more people and revenue kept climbing month after month. By the end of our first year, we'd done about $380,000 in revenue. After expenses, we were barely profitable. But we were in the black. We hadn't failed. We hadn't gone bankrupt. We were actually making money. More importantly, we had momentum. Our client retention rate was sitting around 94%, which was huge for a company our size. Word started spreading throughout the industry about this new supply company that actually gave a damn about customer service and modern logistics. By year 2, we'd crossed the $1 million revenue mark. We hired 6 more people, moved into a bigger facility, and started getting attention from larger clients who were sick of dealing with the old-school distributors that treated customers like an inconvenience. I never called my parents to tell them. I didn't post about our numbers on social media. I didn't send Derek some smug message. I didn't even tell them about the first time we crossed $1 million. I just kept my head down and worked. And strangely enough, the silence from my family became less painful over time. It was actually kind of liberating. I wasn't trying to impress them anymore. I wasn't waiting for Dad to finally say, "I was wrong." I wasn't hoping Mom would suddenly stand up for me. I wasn't trying to prove anything to Derek. I was just building something I knew could work. By year 3, we'd grown to around $2 million in annual revenue and had 23 employees. We had multiple commercial spaces, a real technology platform that our clients genuinely loved, and relationships with manufacturers in 6 different countries. For the first time, I finally paid myself a real salary. Nothing ridiculous, but enough to move out of my crappy apartment and into an actual house. That felt like another milestone. Then something happened that I hadn't expected. I got an inquiry from a venture capital firm. They'd been watching our growth and wanted to talk about investing in the company. I wasn't even looking for funding at that point. We were profitable. We were growing organically. And honestly, I was perfectly comfortable continuing that way. But I took the meeting. One conversation led to another. And eventually, I decided to take their money. We closed a round worth $8 million at a $35 million valuation. That changed the scale of the business overnight. We used the funding to expand aggressively, hire top talent, and build out our technology even further. Within a year of that investment, we doubled our revenue. And through all of it, I still didn't call my parents. At that point, it wasn't even about spite anymore. They'd made their choice. I'd made mine. We were simply living in completely different worlds. And then came year 5. That's where things got interesting. By then, we were doing around $32 million in annual revenue with 140 employees spread across 4 locations. Our client list included some seriously big names. We'd basically become the go-to modernized supply chain solution for mid-size and large manufacturers that were tired of doing business the old-fashioned way. Then one afternoon, I got a call from an acquisition firm that specialized in industrial consolidation. They represented a private equity group that was buying up regional manufacturing and distribution companies. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in selling my company. I wasn't. Not even close. But I listened anyway. You never know what you'll learn from a conversation like that, and it's always useful to know what your company might be worth, even if you have absolutely no intention of selling. During the call, they mentioned something that caught my attention. They were also in the final stages of acquiring a regional manufacturing company that had been struggling financially. The company needed to modernize its operations, update its vendor relationships, and completely streamline its logistics. Then they mentioned the name. I actually went quiet for a second, because I knew that company. It was my dad's employer. The company he'd worked for 25 years. The place where he'd built his entire career. The company where he'd gotten Derek his cushy sales job. I kept my voice completely neutral. What's the plan after the acquisition? They explained it. They were going to eliminate redundant management positions, consolidate operations, modernize the systems, and basically rebuild the company from the ground up. And as they talked, I started realizing just how much had changed. 5 years earlier, my dad had looked me in the eye and told me I'd fail. Now I was sitting on the other end of a phone call discussing the company where he'd spent his entire adult life. And for the first time, I started wondering if this wasn't just an opportunity. Maybe it was the opportunity I'd been waiting for without even knowing it. Anyone who can't adapt to the new systems will eventually be let go. Classic private equity playbook. Interesting, I said, keeping my voice completely neutral. What's the timeline? We're expecting to close within 6 months. After that, we're looking at roughly 18 months for the full integration. The partner continued explaining the situation. The company has good bones, but management has been resistant to change for years. There's a lot of dead weight in middle management that needs to be cleared out. I listened while they walked me through the financial structure, the operational problems, and the leadership team they expected to replace. And with every sentence, the picture became clearer. My dad's company wasn't just struggling. It was slowly dying. Death by 1,000 cuts caused by years of refusing to modernize. And now the vultures were circling. Then the conversation took an interesting turn. They asked if I would consider something different. Instead of them acquiring my company, would I be interested in acquiring theirs? Or, at the very least, partnering with them on the operational integration. They'd clearly done their homework on my company. They knew exactly what we did. And they knew we were probably the best company in the region at modernizing industrial supply chains. Your supply chain optimization model is exactly what this company needs, the lead partner told me. You could come in as an operational consultant. Or we've been authorized to discuss other arrangements if you're interested in taking a larger stake. I'll think about it, I said. I didn't need to think about it. I already knew exactly what I wanted to do. The irony was just too perfect to ignore. The son who had been declared dead for daring to start his own business was now being given the opportunity to buy his father's employer. The business Dad had confidently told me would fail was now successful enough to acquire the company where he'd spent his entire career. Honestly, it was almost poetic. Dark, twisted, incredibly satisfying poetry. The next morning, I called my lawyer and my CFO. I want to explore acquiring the entire company, I told them. Not just partnering on the operational side. Not just consulting. The whole thing. Yes, I said when they asked which company. My dad's employer. They both went quiet. Yes, I know it's complicated. Yes, I'm sure. We ran the numbers. The company was valued at around $18 million, which was significantly below what a healthier company of that size would have been worth. The reason was obvious. They were hemorrhaging money because their operations were terrible, their systems were outdated, and they'd spent years refusing to change. We could afford it. The deal would be funded through a combination of our cash reserves, a loan, and bringing the private equity firm in as a minority partner. Took about 3 months to close everything. Those 3 months were probably the hardest part for me emotionally. Not because of the negotiations, because I had to keep my mouth shut. I couldn't risk word getting back to anyone at the company before the deal was officially closed. Especially my dad. I wanted him to find out when everyone else did. The day we finally closed the acquisition, I went to their headquarters for the first time. I'd heard about that building my entire life. I'd just never been inside it. Dad had never invited me to see where he worked. Not once. Not even when I was a kid. That building had always been his domain. It was where he was important, where he had built his career. And apparently, just like everything else, I wasn't welcome there. Now I was walking through the front doors as the majority owner. The executive team had been gathered in the main conference room. About 20 people were sitting around the table, senior management, department heads, and other key personnel. They were expecting to meet the new owners. Instead, I walked in with my own executive team. My CEO, my CFO, our head of operations, our head of HR, people I'd personally hired, trained, and trusted. People who believed in the vision I'd spent 5 years building. And then I saw him. He was sitting near the middle of the table. Derek was sitting beside him, scrolling through his phone and looking bored. Dad looked tired. Older than I remembered. 5 years without speaking to someone will do that. Your mental image of them doesn't update. You still picture them the way they looked the last time you really knew them. But reality keeps moving. And I'd changed too. I filled out. Gotten a better haircut. I was wearing a tailored suit that actually fit me instead of the cheap department store clothes I'd worn years earlier. And, of course, Dad had absolutely no reason to expect me. Why would he? As far as he knew, I was still the son who had walked away from the family to chase some ridiculous business dream. Our CEO, whom we'd hired about a year earlier when the company started scaling rapidly, stepped forward to begin the introductions. Thank you all for being here. I know transitions like this can be uncertain, so we want to be as transparent as possible about our plans and answer any questions you may have. Then he gestured toward me. This is our founder and majority owner. He'll be overseeing the operational integration personally. That's when Dad finally looked up from the papers in front of him. Our eyes met, and I swear I watched about 5 different emotions cross his face in the span of 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, shock, disbelief, and finally, something that looked like anger mixed with fear. Derek's head snapped up from his phone. His mouth actually fell open. Nobody else in the room understood what was happening. But Dad did. He knew exactly who I was. The son he'd told was dead to him. The son he'd been certain would fail. The son who had just walked into his workplace as the majority owner. I took a breath and addressed the room. Some of you may have questions about our company and what we're planning to do here. I kept my voice calm and professional. We've been operating in the industrial supply and logistics space for 5 years. We started as a small startup and grew into a $32 million annual revenue company by modernizing systems that much of this industry has allowed to become outdated. I paused. That's exactly what we intend to do here. Dad's face was turning red. He looked like he was trying to decide whether to say something or have a stroke. I understand that change is difficult, I continued, deliberately making eye contact with Dad. But this company has been losing money for 3 straight years. Operations are inefficient. The systems are outdated. The management structure is bloated. I paused. That changes now. One of the other managers raised his hand. He was an older guy who looked like he'd been working there since the building was constructed. What does that mean for the current personnel? He asked. It means everyone will be evaluated based on performance and adaptability. I kept my tone calm. We're not here to slash payroll just for the sake of cutting people. We're here to build something sustainable. But that requires people who can actually work in a modern operational environment. I looked around the room. Those who can adapt will have opportunities. I shrugged. Those who can't won't. Dad finally found his voice. Came out strained. You can't be serious. I turned toward him and looked at him almost as if I'd only just noticed he was there. I'm sorry. You are? His face went from red to almost purple. You know damn well who I am. Oh, right. I glanced down at my tablet like I was checking notes. You're the operations manager. Dad stared at me. I continued scrolling. We'll need to schedule a one-on-one to review your department's performance metrics. I'm seeing some concerning trends in efficiency ratios and overhead costs. This is a joke, Derek suddenly blurted out. You can't just... I actually can, I said calmly. I looked directly at him. We own the company now. The room went completely silent. The question is whether you're going to be an asset or a liability moving forward. Nobody said another word. Everyone could feel the tension in the room. They just didn't understand why. Dad suddenly stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. I need to speak with you privately. That's not how this works. I didn't raise my voice. Any concerns can be addressed through the proper channels. HR will be reaching out to everyone individually over the next week. I'm your father. You're an employee of a company I own. I interrupted. Dad stared at me. And right now, you're being insubordinate in a professional meeting. I suggest you sit down. He looked like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mom had taught me to respect my elders. Dad had taught me that family came with conditions. Business school had taught me how to keep a straight face during hostile negotiations. So, in a weird way, thanks for the lessons. Dad slowly sat back down. He didn't really have a choice with everyone watching. We finished the meeting professionally. We went over the transition plan, the timeline for operational changes, and what employees could expect over the coming weeks. Everything was handled by the book. The entire time, Dad just stared at me like I was a complete stranger. And honestly, I guess I was. The son he'd known had been gone for 5 years. The man sitting across from him now was someone he'd never bothered to understand. After the meeting ended, Dad tried to corner me in the hallway. I was speaking with our head of HR about the evaluation schedule when I suddenly felt his hand on my arm. We need to talk, he said. His voice was low and intense. Now. I pulled my arm away. I have meetings scheduled all day. If you need to discuss something work-related, send an email to my assistant and we'll schedule a time. Work-related. He looked almost offended. This is about family. I lowered my voice so only he could hear me. There is no family. He froze. You made that clear 5 years ago. I held his gaze. I was dead to you, remember? His jaw tightened. Well, consider this a haunting. He shook his head. You're doing this because you're petty. Because I didn't support your little business. I'm doing this because it's a good investment. I said it matter-of-factly. The fact that you work here is irrelevant to me. You're just another employee who needs to prove their value. I paused. Same as everyone else. Dad's expression hardened. I've worked here for 25 years. And in those 25 years, you've watched operations become progressively less efficient. You've watched costs spiral while revenue declined. I looked him straight in the eye. Your tenure isn't impressive. He flinched slightly. Honestly, It's concerning that you've been in leadership for this long without fixing some of the most basic problems. That one hit him. I could see it immediately. He was starting to realize I wasn't bluffing. This wasn't an emotional power play. I wasn't standing there trying to punish him for what he'd done to me. I'd actually analyzed his performance the same way I'd analyze any other employee. And the numbers weren't on his side. The fastener procurement process alone, I continued, takes an average of 47 days from requisition to delivery. Dad didn't say anything. Industry standard is around 12 days. I tapped my tablet. Your inventory management system is still running on software from 2006. His face tightened. You have 3 people doing jobs that could be automated with basic modern software. I kept going. And your vendor relationships are so poorly managed that we're paying about 23% above market rate on standard components because nobody has negotiated new contracts in 8 years. Dad's face went from red to pale. Because he knew. Deep down, he'd always known. He'd let things slide. He'd gotten comfortable. He'd been coasting on seniority and tenure instead of performance. But nobody had ever challenged him. He'd been there so long that he was practically untouchable. Until now. You can't fire me, he said. There was uncertainty in his voice now. I won't fire you because you're my father. I paused. I'll fire you if you're not doing your job. He swallowed. So I suggest you start documenting exactly what value you bring to this organization. I looked down at the preliminary reports one more time. Because from everything I've seen so far, your department is the biggest operational bottleneck in the entire company. Derek showed up then, looking like he couldn't decide whether he should be scared or angry. Somehow he managed to look like both. This is messed up, man. You can't just... What's your exact role here? I asked. He hesitated. Senior Sales Associate. And what were your sales numbers last quarter? He shifted uncomfortably. I don't have them memorized. They're in my file. Right? Well, I've looked at your file. I pulled up the numbers on my tablet. You've been below quota for 6 consecutive quarters. Your client retention rate is 61%, which is 30 points below the department average. You also have the highest expense report submissions in your entire division. Derek's face started to change. And according to your manager's notes, you spend a significant portion of your workday on personal calls and long lunches. His face went pale. That's not... Those reports are accurate. I cut in. I've reviewed everything. He went quiet. So here's what's going to happen. You're going on a 90-day performance improvement plan. Derek stared at me. You'll have specific sales quotas to meet and specific behavioral standards to follow. If you meet them, great. You keep your job. If you don't, you're out. You can't do this to family, Dad said again. He said it like those 3 words were some kind of magic spell that was supposed to make everything stop. I looked at him. You're right. He seemed almost relieved for half a second. I can't do this to family. Then I paused. But we're not family, remember? The relief disappeared from his face. You made that choice 5 years ago. I'm just respecting it. The next 2 months were honestly some of the most satisfying months of my life. Every department was audited. Every process was evaluated. Every employee was reviewed. And I was there for most of it. Not hovering over people or micromanaging them, but I was present, visible, involved. Dad would walk past my office and see me working with the same teams he'd managed for years. And I could see how much it bothered him. He had to watch the son he'd written off as a failure walk into his workplace and understand the business better than he did. The failure he'd predicted was now running circles around the legacy he'd spent decades building. And the worst part for him, and I say this with absolutely zero guilt, was that I was actually good at it. Really good. Employees who'd been checked out for years suddenly became engaged because someone was finally listening to their ideas. Problems that had existed for years were getting solved in weeks. Dad's operations department was a complete disaster. 20 years of "we've always done it this way" had created a Frankenstein's monster of inefficiency. There were redundant positions, outdated software, unnecessary procedures, and processes that made absolutely no sense. We basically had to gut the whole thing and rebuild it from the ground up. Dad fought every single change. He sent long emails explaining why things couldn't be done differently. He called emergency meetings to explain why his way was better. He complained to anyone who would listen that I was specifically targeting him. And honestly, he wasn't completely wrong. But he wasn't completely right either. Yes, I had personal reasons for wanting to prove him wrong. I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. But objectively, his department was terrible. The numbers didn't lie. After 60 days of evaluations, we started making personnel decisions. About 30% of the staff was let go. Some couldn't adapt. Some simply refused to. A few were already close to retirement and honestly seemed relieved to be done with the whole mess. Others were younger but had spent years coasting and had no intention of changing. Dad survived the first round of cuts. Barely. We moved him from operations manager to a senior specialist position. It was a major demotion. His salary was cut, his management responsibilities were gone, and he no longer had anyone reporting directly to him. He was going to do actual work now instead of simply managing other people. He tried to refuse the position. I gave him two choices: take the new role or accept a severance package and leave. He took the position. He had bills to pay. And apparently, Derek hadn't contributed much to the household finances in years. As for Derek, he didn't make it through his performance improvement plan. Shocking, I know. To give him credit, he actually tried. But he'd spent so many years coasting that he genuinely didn't know how to sell. His numbers stayed bad. His attitude didn't improve. His behavior didn't change. So when the 90 days were up, we let him go. That night, he sent me a text. It was the first communication I'd received from him in 5 years. "Hope you're proud of yourself. You destroyed your family over a grudge." I didn't respond. I just blocked the number. 3 months into the acquisition, we'd stabilized operations. For the first time in years, revenue was trending upward. Client satisfaction scores were improving. The employees who stayed were actually engaged, productive, and working more efficiently. One evening, I was still in the office late, going through some reports. Most of the staff had already gone home when I heard a knock on my door. I looked up. It was Dad. He looked rough. He'd lost weight. There were dark circles under his eyes, and the last few months seemed to have aged him considerably. "Can I come in?" he asked. There was no demand in his voice this time. It was an actual question. "It's late," I said. "I know." He hesitated. We need to talk." He took a breath. "Really talk?" I gestured toward the chair across from my desk. He slowly walked over and sat down like even that took effort. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then he finally spoke. "I made a mistake." I looked at him. 5 years ago," he continued, "I made a mistake." "Okay," I said. He looked confused by my response. "That's it." I leaned back in my chair. "Okay, what do you want me to say?" He looked down at his hands. "Do you want forgiveness? Absolution? Do you want me to tell you everything is fine now?" "I want." He struggled to finish the sentence. Finally, he looked up at me. "I want to understand why you did this." He swallowed. "Why you bought this company? Was it just to punish me?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. "It was a good business decision." He looked at me, waiting. The company was undervalued. We had the capital, the expertise, and the resources to turn it around. The fact that you happened to work here was just a bonus. "A bonus?" he repeated flatly. "Yeah." I leaned back in my chair. "A reminder that the failure you predicted never happened. That the son you gave up on built something successful enough to buy the company where you spent your entire career." I paused. "And that your support, or your lack of it, didn't matter in the end." He flinched. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "About you. About your business. I was wrong." "I know." He looked at me. "That's all you have to say?" I shrugged. "What do you want me to say, Dad? That I forgive you? That everything is suddenly fine and we can just move past it?" I shook my head. "You didn't just fail to support me. You disowned me." His eyes dropped. "You told me I was dead to you over a business decision. I was trying to protect you." "Bullshit." I cut him off. He went quiet. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your ego. I could feel years of frustration coming back as I spoke. You couldn't handle the possibility that I might succeed doing something you didn't approve of. You couldn't handle the idea that I might actually prove you wrong. That I might be right when I told you the industry needed to change. That I might even be better at this industry than you were. He didn't argue. He just sat there and listened. And Derek, I continued, you enabled him his entire life. You gave him everything and expected nothing from him. You turned him into someone who can't function without somebody helping him. Dad looked down. You tried so hard to protect him that you actually ruined him. Meanwhile, you told me I'd ruin my life simply because I wanted to be independent. I know, he said quietly. For the first time, his voice sounded genuinely defeated. I see that now. He rubbed his hands together. He can't keep a job. He can't handle responsibility. Your mother and I have been supporting him financially since you let him go. I didn't let him go, I corrected him. Dad looked up. He failed to meet basic performance standards. That's on him. I paused. And it's also on you for spending his entire life teaching him that his actions would never have consequences. Dad didn't respond. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, he spoke. I'm sorry. I looked at him. For all of it, he continued. For not believing in you. For choosing sides. For everything I said that night. He swallowed hard. You deserved better. Yeah, I said. I did. He nodded slowly. Is there any way to fix this? I didn't answer immediately. To fix us? He asked. I looked at him, really looked at him. I could see the regret on his face. This wasn't the angry, stubborn man who had stood in that kitchen 5 years earlier and told me I was dead to him. He looked genuinely remorseful. And part of me wanted to forgive him. Part of me wanted to rebuild something. But there was another part of me that remembered everything. Every dismissive comment. Every time he chose Derek over me. Every achievement of mine that barely earned a reaction while Derek was celebrated for doing the bare minimum. Every family gathering I'd been excluded from over the past 5 years. That part of me wasn't ready. I don't know, I said honestly. Dad waited. Maybe someday. I paused. But not today. He nodded. Today, you're just an employee who needs to prove he can adapt to the new systems. Same as everyone else. He looked down. That's it. That's it. Dad slowly stood up. Before leaving, he stopped. For what it's worth, he said. You built something impressive. He looked at me. I should have told you that 5 years ago. Yeah, I said. You should have. He left without another word. Over the next year, we completely integrated the acquisition and turned the company around. Revenue increased by 45%. Operational costs dropped by 30%. Every major metric improved. The employees who stayed were making more money, dealing with less chaos, and working in an environment that actually functioned. Even Dad had to admit that the new systems worked better. He stayed in his specialist role. He did the work. He didn't complain. We had a few brief professional interactions over the following months, but nothing personal. He'd show up, do his job, and go home like any other employee. Derek, meanwhile, moved back in with our parents. The last thing I heard through the family grapevine was that he'd gotten a job at a gym selling personal training packages. Apparently, that wasn't going particularly well either. A few months after everything settled down, Mom sent me an email. It was long, very long. Most of it was about family, forgiveness, healing, and moving forward. I read the whole thing. Then I closed it. I didn't respond. I just wasn't ready to have that conversation. As for me, the company I founded is now worth more than $120 million. We're expanding into new markets and continuing to build technology that's changing the way the industry operates. I bought a house, a really nice one, and paid cash for it. I got a dog. I started dating someone who actually respects me and respects what I've built. Honestly, life is pretty damn good. Do I regret buying my dad's company? Not for a second. Was part of my motivation proving him wrong? Absolutely. I'm not gonna lie about that. But it was also a smart business move. A very smart one. It made me and my investors a lot of money. Sometimes the best revenge really is just living well and succeeding in exactly the way someone told you that you couldn't. Dad isn't dead to me. He never was. But he's not really my father anymore either. He's just a man who used to be one of the most important people in my life and made choices that permanently changed our relationship. He works at a company I own. He collects a paycheck. He goes home. Same as the other 140 employees. The difference is those other 140 people never looked at their son and told him he was dead to them because he wanted to chase a dream. So yeah, he's not dead to me, but he is unemployed from the position he once thought made him untouchable. And Derek? He's unemployed from the nepotism ride that was never going to last forever. Meanwhile, I'm still here, building, growing, succeeding. Turns out I didn't need their support after all. Who would have thought? Okay, fine. I definitely thought I could do it, but actually proving it? That's still satisfying as hell. And apparently YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. So if you're hooked on this story, go ahead and smash that hype button. It basically tells YouTube, this video deserves to blow up.